Hello, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Cameroonians. My name is Lobe Eseme. I am the leader of the Cameroon Federalist Movement, which is an organization that wants to see a federalist system of government in Cameroon. Our members come from East and West Cameroon, at home and abroad, even though most of our activities and activism are abroad. Well, this is for obvious reason. The government of Cameroon doesn't like us very much. And that's okay, because the feeling is neutral. I'm also the leader of the Anglophone Action Group, a sister organization to the Cameroon Federalist Movement. The main objective of the Anglophone Action Group is to seek justice and fairness for West Cameroonians. In other words, to make sure that West Cameroonians are treated equally to East Cameroonians. That all Cameroonians are born equal and all Cameroonians should be treated equally and should have equal access to public resources and opportunities, which is not currently the case. The Anglophone Action Group and the Cameroon Federalist Movement, as you can see, do intersect in many areas. And very often, both organizations do travel the same pathway and seek the same goals. Running these two organizations is my real passion. It's what keeps me up at night. It's what gets me up in the morning. It is what I like to do, because my love for the country is strong. But like most people, I do have a day job. I have to make a living. I have to make some money. I am a physician by training. I actually graduated from the Faculty of Medicine in Yaoundé. I have specialist training in infectious diseases, public health, preventive medicine, occupational medicine, and healthcare management. That is how I make a living. But this is not about me. This is about a country that we love so much. It's about Cameroon. Our country is going through a very difficult time, and it will literally take all of us, all our might, all our talents, and our time to fix it. And we have to work together. So over the next 60 minutes, we'll talk Cameroon. We'll talk about the difficulties, but more importantly, we will talk about the solution. We're going to divide this presentation into 6 sections. The first section is what you're actually watching right now, the introduction, where we're going to describe the nature of the presentation. The introduction, which is this, will be followed by an overview of the history of Cameroon. We have a history. We come from somewhere. But what is this history? Who are we? And where do we want to go? Even the name Cameroon comes from somewhere. There is a meaning to that name, coined by the Portuguese, because they found a place full of prawns. But are we really the people of prawns? Is there another name that really captures our history, our identity? Well, that's something, another topic for another day. But we'll talk about our history from the Portuguese to the Germans to the trusteeship under the French and the British, under the auspices of the League of Nations, and then the United Nations. We'll talk about independence and the post-independence, how East and West came together. It's a beautiful history. I was not taught this history when I was in school, which is a shame. All Cameroonians need to know this history. That will be the second section. The third section will be to describe the social, cultural, and traditional setup of our country. Because we have this misconception that democracy is a foreign concept. And the West, the Europeans and the Americans, have so brainwashed us that we think democracy belongs to them. Well, it's not true. Because if you study the African traditional setup, our culture, that is how democracy actually is. We have a chief, the traditional ruler, and he has his advisors, the wise men, traditional council members. They work like a parliament, and they come from the people. Each family head is represented in that council. That's really the definition of a parliament. So the Cameroon traditional setup, which by extension is actually the African traditional setup, by its very nature is democratic. All we have to do is to free them and let them work. So that will be the third section. The fourth section will be to discuss and describe the current system of government. But why is it that we have a system that everything is based in Yaoundé? Well, there is a reason for that. This hyper-centralized setup comes from somewhere. It's a vestige, a remnant of colonialism. Well, is there any advantage to keeping this structure? I don't think so, but we'll see. As a matter of fact, there are advantages to replacing this system with a better one. And that will be the federalist system of government, which will be the fifth section. We'll describe federalism, how it fits in the Cameroon setup. But more importantly, we'll try to see the best way to institute federalism, because we cannot just implement federalism overnight. We can't say the people who are currently running Cameroon and the institutions will disappear We can't do that. It has to go through some stages. Finally, we will conclude this presentation by summarizing the most important concepts and argue why federalism is not only the best system for Cameroon, but that it's the only system that can work. Thank you, and please keep listening. Fellow Cameroonians, this is Dr. Eseme again. Presentation on the history of Cameroon, an overview. I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to be giving you details. What I'll tell you though is what you should know in terms of the main events. You know, I'd love to tell you that the history of Cameroon is a bed of roses, that it's a beautiful thing. Far from it. I'd like to tell you that I'm proud of our history, and I'm proud of what our parents did and their parents. Now, they didn't do much to defend us. And maybe currently we are not doing much if we keep doing what we're doing. Anyway, yes, the history of Cameroon in a nutshell. The first thing you have to understand is this. Europeans did not come to Cameroon for pleasure. They did not come to Cameroon in good faith. They certainly did not come for friendship. They came for three main reasons: to conquer, to occupy, and to steal our resources. And boy, they did. The first criminals to come on board were the Portuguese. The story goes that they were sailing and found a river full of prawns. So they call it Rio dos Cameroons. That's where the name Cameroon comes from. But think about it. Like foolish people, we're still keeping that name to this day. How stupid are we? Are we really a people of prawns? Is that all about Cameroon? Is that our identity? Why are we still keeping that name? Is there a reason? Don't we have another name that better describes our people, our history, our tradition, even our geography? It's an insult to keep the name Cameroon. But apparently nobody in the government is thinking about that. Okay. So the Portuguese stayed in Cameroon till about 1886. You know, the Germans were more aggressive, so they drove the Portuguese away from Cameroon and occupied Cameroon. Not because they wanted to free Cameroon from the Portuguese, no. They wanted Cameroon because the objective was always the same: to conquer, to occupy, and to steal. The Germans were in Cameroon from 1886 to maybe 1917, when they lost the First World War. There is a caveat though, and I'll be remiss if I don't say this. In the 30 years that the Germans were in Cameroon from 1886 and to 1917, like I said earlier, they did more in terms of infrastructure and industry development than the British and the French did in 40 years of their occupation of Cameroon, and certainly more, I'll tell you, than the two Cameroon governments that we've had since independence in 1960 and 1961. The Germans opened and founded the Cameroon Development Corporation, which to this day is the second highest employer. They build roads. They build a railway between Kumba and Douala. They build houses. They build power camp. A lot of things. That does not excuse the role, does not justify or cancel their predator role that they played, which was to conquer, occupy, and to steal resources. Anyway, the Germans are there. 1917, in the middle of the First World War, the Germans are defeated, and Cameroon is seized from the Germans, and like a cow, Cameroon is handed over to the British and the French to be slaughtered. First under the auspices of the League of Nations, and then through the United Nations, because the Germans lost the Second World War again. And so the United Nations replaced the League of Nations. But the idea was always the same. Cameroon moved from one foster home, which was with the Germans, to another foster home, which was the French and the British. Basically, Cameroon was under adult supervision. That was until 1960, when the French felt the need, not out of love again, but it was pressure coming from all their colonies abroad, to organize charades of independence celebrations throughout Africa. So in 1960, the French decided to grant independence to their portion of Cameroon. They called it La République du Cameroun. The British were still holding to their portion, which they had divided into two. There was the northern zone, called Northern Cameroons, and the southern zone, called Southern Cameroons. Until 1961, when they organized, some charade of referendum. They call it a plebiscite, whatever it was. But it was what it was. Northern Cameroons decided to join Nigeria as part of that nation to achieve their own independence. Southern Cameroons, which is the present-day Northwest and Southwest regions, decided to join La République du Cameroun in a federation. That's important. Federation. That was a choice given to Southern Cameroons. Was it the best of choices? No. Could there have been another option, like get independence on your own standing? Yes, but that never happened. So those who say Southern Cameroons was independent and now they want to restore that independence are misleading Cameroonians, and they are revisionists of history. The truth is, Southern Cameroons gained independence by joining La République du Cameroun. And so they formed this union, this Federalist Union called the Federal Republic of Cameroon, made up of two entities. The former Southern Cameroons became West Cameroon, and La République du Cameroun, which had just gained independence from France in 1960, became East Cameroon. Now, I would be remiss if I were to tell you that that was a perfect union. Oh, it wasn't. But it's what it was. Because if you read the 1961 Federal Constitution of Cameroon, you'll want to vomit, and I will not blame you for that. It was a mess. But somehow, that's what our leaders at that time decided to sign up to. There was only one thing in that constitution that, to me, was a protection. It was Article 47, which apparently prevented the Union, the Federalist Union, from being tampered with. But in 1972, Aidjo did just that. He decided to get rid of the Federation. And Cameroon was renamed the United Republic of Cameroon. So the assimilation that started in 1961, when that constitution was accepted, was almost completed in 1972. There are many reasons for that. Resources were found in West Cameroon, and Aidjo wanted to be in control of everything. He was already in control in so many ways. He wanted more. So the name changed from Federal Republic of Cameroon to the United Republic. Now fast forward to 1984. Paul Biya is now in power since 1982. And he says, oh no, the assimilation was not completed in 1972. We need to do more. We need to just finally remove any evidence of the history of West Cameroon, and now we call the nation the Republic of Cameroon. Imagine such hubris, where you completely rewrite history. Basically, Paul Biya erased the entire history of West Cameroon and Southern Cameroon, of the part of Cameroon that is now the Northwest and Southwest regions. That's what happened in 1984. Well, 1990 came, and democracy was again topical. Multipartyism was the story of the day. Frundi, a West Cameroonian, stood up from his party, the Social Democratic Front. He became a national sensation. Well, we all know how it ended. He didn't go very far. But in 1993, something happened. A group of young, brilliant, educated West Cameroonians, three of them, Dr. Simon Munzu, Barrister Ikontak Elad, and Dr. Carlson Anyango, great gentlemen. They decided to put in renewed energy for equality of West Cameroonians. So they organized two conferences. The first one was in Boya, All Anglophone Conference, resulted in the Boya Declaration. The next year, they organized the AAC2 in Bamenda, which resulted in the Bamenda Proclamation. Now, the government of Cameroon does what the government of Cameroon does. They started intimidating these guys, forced them to leave the country. But the activism of those three great Cameroonians led to a new constitution in 1996, in which the government of Cameroon said, okay, we're going to institute decentralization. But with Dr. Munzu out of the country, with Dr. Carlson Anyangwe out of the country, nobody followed through with the pressure. And so the government said, well, we are no longer any obligation to implement decentralization. See, nobody is breathing down our throats. So for 20 years, from 1996 to 2016, nothing happened. The government did not do a single thing to help West Cameroonians. Until 2016, right? We had how it works. Every once in a while, someone comes up who has to take the mantle and continue the fight. And this was Barrister Bala from the lawyers, and Mr. Tassan representing the teachers. So these were labor union, two labor unions taking the mantle and pushing for justice and fairness for West Cameroonians. Well, did the government listen to them? No. They arrested them, they beat them up, threw them in jail. We are where we are today, where we have basically a civil war because of the way the Cameroon government has maltreated, mistreated, disrespected, marginalized West Cameroonians. Starting from 1961. This is a chronic history. Along the line, various Anglophones, West Cameroonians I should say, tried to bend the arc of justice, like Dr. Martin Luther King says. But the Cameroon government has been resisting any change. That's our history. That's what it is. So thank you for listening to this part of the presentation. Thank you. Welcome to section 3 of this presentation. My name is Dr. Lobe Eseme again. In section 2, we talked about the history of Cameroon. Not a very pleasant history, but it is our history and we have to live with it. In this section, I'd like to explain very briefly our traditional setup, who we are, and why we do things the way we do, our values. It's important we understand who we are, because the Western world has tried to change us, and it's impossible for a person to be something that they are not. The only way we can make progress as a people is to be true to our identity, to be true to ourselves. So, who are we? The first thing to remember is to clearly explain who we are not. Because if we can take ourselves out of that box, that paradigm of thinking we are something else, then we begin to understand. Well, we are not a former Portuguese territory. We are not a former German colony. We are not a former British and French trusteeship. Very important. Like I explained in section 2, these people were invaders. They were conquerors, oppressors. They were thieves. They are not our friends. They came to conquer, to oppress, and to steal. So we do not want to identify with them. It's important. We are not Francophones. We are not Anglophones. We may speak English. We may speak French. Just because we have to communicate. But that's not who we are. This is what we are. We are Africans. We are Cameroonians. We have traditional values, culture. We are a collection of tribes. That's the way the African system is organized. The last list I saw was, I think, 123 or 124 different tribes in Cameroon. That's who we are. Now, what is a tribe? It's a traditional unit at the head of which is a traditional authority. Depending on the area, we call them different names. Chiefs or mfons. In the northwest region of Cameroon, they're mainly known as mfons. In other areas like the Bamoons, Sultan, the North, Lamidos, whatever the name we give or ascribe to the traditional authority, the main thing to understand is that traditional authorities derive their power from the people. Very important. They derive their legitimacy from the respect, the honor they get from the people. The day they lose that trust, that respect, that honor, is the day they stop to be legitimate traditional ruler. Contrary to what people may think, the authentic African traditional ruler is not an authoritarian. He manages the affairs of the tribe, of the village, or the neighborhood in collaboration with a council, a traditional council, which is headed by a president. And each sector of that community, of that tribe, of that neighborhood is represented in that council. Council members will meet every so often, weekly or monthly, to discuss the affairs of the unit. Debates are usually rigorous. I know this firsthand. My father used to be a quarterhead. He's gone now. May his soul rest in peace. In a city, a quarterhead has the equivalence of a third-degree chief. And when I was a boy, I would see and observe sometimes. I would sit in their meetings and listen to their debates, how they will resolve conflicts in the neighborhood. I was fascinated. The focus, the emphasis was always on peaceful resolution. That's democracy. That's how conflicts should be resolved, through debates. And in the end, always, they will arrive at a solution that will be good not only for the plaintiff and the defendant, but for the entire community. That is how the typical traditional setup is organized in Cameroon. Unfortunately, what has happened is that our government has politicized the whole thing. We now have a situation where traditional authorities are given political positions and powers. They are now very powerful, and they are torn between their loyalty for the people from whom they derive their legitimacy and their loyalty to the government who has given them political positions. That is how this government has destroyed our traditional fiber. In my opinion, the government should stay out of traditional affairs. And it should be clear that the position or the office of a traditional leader, it must be incompatible with holding any public office. You cannot be a traditional leader at the same time you are a mayor or a minister or a director of a public corporation. If you do that, you result in a conflict of interest scenario. The best way to maintain our traditional setup is to let chiefs be there only to manage the affairs of their tribes. That way, we get chiefs who truly want to be there for the people. Any person who thinks he wants more money, and it's your right, then maybe you should not be a traditional leader. But that is how we are as a people. Our traditional setup, by definition, is intrinsically democratic. What the government should do is to facilitate, help traditional values to bring out the values in such a way that traditions are preserved, that the people of the various tribes are proud to belong, but also to prevent conflict between the tribes. We are a huge nation, a huge collection of tribes. There is a way we can live in unity within this diversity. The government's role, in my opinion, should be as a facilitator. No interference in tribal affairs. This is the end of this section on the traditional, social, and cultural setup of Cameroon. Thanks for listening. Welcome back to the fourth section of my presentation. In the previous sections, we talked about, to give an overview of the history of Cameroon. We talked about the traditional setup of Cameroon. This fourth section has to do with the current system. How is Cameroon being run, and why is it a problem? Well, it's important to note that we have in Cameroon not only a centralized system, but I would say a very centralized system, a hyper-centralized system. We have a system where everything comes from Yaoundé. Everything is decided by the central government in Yaoundé. Well, the reason the colonizers, the people who used to oppress us, and in so many ways they are still oppressing us, the colonizers, so these were the Portuguese, the Germans, and then the British and the French. The reason they had a centralized system was because they wanted to oppress us. Their objective, like I've said it time and time again, and I'll keep saying it, was to conquer, to oppress, and to steal our resources. And if your objective is to do that, if your objective is to subjugate the people into just working for you, into slavery, into being second-class citizens, yes, by all means, a centralized system of government is what you want to choose. But if you want to liberate the people, if you want them to be masters of their own destinies and captains of their ships, then you have to give power to them. You have to decentralize power. We have a system in Cameroon where one man in Yaoundé signs identification documents, whether it's ID cards or passports, for all 26 million Cameroonians. That's not only a very inefficient way to run a country, it's tiring on the guy. Just imagine you're the one signing, and you have to literally sign millions of documents. You're going to injure your wrists. So not only is it inefficient, I think it's stupid. But that's the situation we have. How can someone who lives thousands of kilometers from Yaoundé be dependent on an officer, a bureaucrat in Yaoundé for water? If you live in Maroua and you want electricity, there is a bureaucrat in Yaoundé who is in charge of your power supply. It's not only inefficient, it's stupid. Hyper-centralized systems are good for oppressors. Our president is responsible for primary education in our villages. Does that make sense to anybody? Our president is responsible for security, public security in our towns. Does that make sense to anybody? Listen, there is a better way. The better way is to decentralize power. I'm not saying the central government should give all power to the states or to the decentralized units. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying a better way, a more efficient way, is to give the powers that the regions need to manage their own affairs. Things like education, public security, the environment, tourism, industry, their local economies. They can manage those. Yaoundé doesn't have to be involved in every single decision. The central government has at most 5 areas of sovereignty. At most 5 that they should handle, and they have to handle, because those are areas of sovereignty. National defense is one of them. If the country is being attacked, you need a centralized command. So the military is the purview of the central government. You want quick mobilization. You want centralized command structure. The next area is that of finance. The central government should be responsible for printing money and to operate a national central treasury from which it can lend money to the regions. Money control, monetary policy is for the central government. Another area of sovereignty is immigration. Yeah. You want the central government to know who comes in to the country. It's very important. So passports, establishment of passports should be an area for the central government. But there should be decentralized offices all over the country where you can apply for a passport in your village or your area of residence in your town. And you should be able to get that passport within a week or two. You don't have to go to the regional capital, which is what is currently happening in most cases. The fourth area is customs. Okay? Customs, yes. You want the government to be able to institute tariffs for goods that are coming into the country. The central government should not have anything to do with internal public security. There is no need for a national police force except in the area of a specialized investigational unit. Otherwise, daily police activities should be handled by the regions. Outside these 5 areas, military, monetary policy, immigration, customs, and there's a 5th area that I forgot to mention, external relations, foreign affairs. Yes, the central government gets to appoint ambassadors to represent the country and to receive foreign accredited ambassadors. All other areas, whether it's oil, whether it's forestry, tourism, sports, public health, everything else should be managed by the decentralized regions. If we do that, we'll have a more efficient nation. We have a more productive nation, and we'll be able to develop faster because you reach a situation where each decentralized unit will be competing with the other for development. Oh, it's going to be a fascinating competition. When Region A finds out that Region B issues identity cards same day, they'll do the same. If they find out that this region has a more efficient public health system, they'll try to copy. And so that the central government should focus on those 5 areas of sovereignty. That's the type of system we need. But unfortunately, our leaders today are still living in a system that is a carryover, a vestige, a remnant of the colonized system, forgetting that the objective of the colonizers was different. They wanted to steal, they wanted to oppress, they wanted to conquer. But if you think you're independent, then you have to have a different system. A system that permits your people to develop quickly and not maintain a colonial system. Well, thank you. This is the end of section 4. Thanks for listening. So welcome to section 5 of our presentation. This is the most important section in my opinion. It's the section that talks about the system that we Federalists want to see in Cameroon. That's a federalist system of government. Before I go into the section proper, I want to make sure you understand the difference between federalism and decentralization. Because I was one of those who attended the major national dialogue in Cameroon from September 30 to October 4, 2019. And I've already given my opinion on what I thought that dialogue was all about. It was a complete waste of time and resources. The Cameroon government does not have any intention of truly resolving the problems that we face as a country, and it showed from the way they handled the dialogue and the resolutions that were presented. We never voted for any special status. That's just someone's idea of what they think should be done. But of course, as we see it on a daily basis, decentralization has zero chance of succeeding in Cameroon. It's just a continuation of time wasting. Anyway, so the government talks decentralization, and they sell this idea that they are going to decentralize. By the way, they've never been serious, because the 1996 constitution, which originally talked about decentralization, was kept in the drawers for 20 years or more. But that's what power is. Power doesn't like to give. Power must be fought for power to release a little bit of its attributes. But here's the main difference. Decentralization means there is a centralized power structure like the one we have in Cameroon today, the one in Yaoundé, where Paul Biya is the beginning, he is the process, he is the middle, and he is the end. That's centralization. And then in a decentralized setup, the centralized power gives a little bit of that power to the regions. But the centralized power always makes sure there is a representative of that centralized power to supervise the decentralized authority. Did you get that? So, the centralized power pretends to give power to the region, but then turns around and sends another authority to control the decentralized structure. This is what happened when the government in the 90s started this idea of government delegates, because they were afraid the opposition parties were going to take and win some councils, especially in the urban areas like Kumba, Limbe, Douala, and Kongsamba, and so on. So the mayors were duly elected, and indeed the opposition parties won. So the government appointed government delegates who were representing the central government to supervise the mayors. That's decentralization. That's what the government is currently doing. They have regional councils in their so-called special status, which is just a nonsense, to be honest. And it has zero chance of resolving the current crisis. Zero. It's a waste of time. It's not going to work. But the government says there's a regional council headed by a regional council president. They have council members. There's a house of chiefs and so on. On paper, it sounds beautiful. And you say, wow, what a beautiful idea. Maybe we should work within that structure. No, you can't. Because in that same structure, the unelected appointed governor, again, who is the governor? The governor is the representative of the president, the central authority. So the governor is the boss of the regional council president. Hello? Who do you think you're fooling? It's a non-starter. This their special status thing is rubbish. So that's decentralization. How does it differ with federalism? Here's the beauty of federalism. Unlike decentralization, where power comes from the central authority and goes downward to the decentralized units, in federalism, power comes from the decentralized, from the peripheral units, like the regions, like the villages, like the towns. And then these peripheral units decide to give some of their powers to the central government. Remember those 5 areas I talked about in section 4? Those areas of sovereignty? Well, the federated, I think that's the right word to use, not decentralized, because decentralized means there's decentralization. In federalism, we have federated units. That's the right word. Federated units will now give some of their powers to the federal government in those 5 sovereign areas. But power comes from the people, from the villages to the towns, to the divisions, to the regions. The Cameroon Federalist Movement and the Anglophone Action Group is recommending a system of at least 10 federated states. At least 10 federated states. I say at least because we currently have 10 regions. So that's the minimum. But some regions are very big and they can split into 2 or more. But at the very least, we need 10. Where the governors will be elected, where the divisional executives will be elected, where all the mayors will be elected, even village authorities will be elected, and they will handle their own affairs. That way, if you don't have water in your town, chances are that the person responsible for your water supply goes to the same church as you, and you'll meet them in church. Ask them why you don't have water. Right now, if you don't have power, the person responsible for that power is in your own. You don't even know him. You see him only on TV. How do you hold him accountable? In a federated state, if your local hospital doesn't have supplies, you know who is responsible. You know where he lives, because you elected him, and you can hold him accountable. That's federalism. If you look at our setup, if you look at our tribal nature, if you look at our diversity in culture, federalism fits like a glove in the hand. It's going to be beautiful. But I'm not naive. It's going to take a long time to get there. Because change is hard. It's very hard. But we have to start, and start early. In the next section, I'm going to give my concluding remarks on this presentation, and I thank you guys for listening. I will summarize in a few words, and that's it. I want to thank the organizers of the Global Summit for Peace on Cameroon for giving me this opportunity to present our points of view. Thank you. Well, guys, this is the final segment of my presentation. I want to once again thank all the organizers of this Global Summit for Peace in Cameroon. In particular, I want to thank Ms. Berkeley for doing this. We truly appreciate your effort, Ms. Berkeley, and we will support this initiative any way that we can. I have, in the course of the last 60 minutes, we've talked about our history and our troubles. We've also talked about the solutions to our problems. History is what it is. We have gone through some troubled times. History has made it in such a way that we have been oppressed, we have been colonized, and we've passed through some very hard hands. We've encountered some people who have never meant any good for us, but that's our history. We don't have to cry. We cannot go back and change the hands of time. History is what it is. What we can do, though, what we have the power to do, is to be the masters of our destinies, the captains of our ships, to change our future. That we have the power to do. It is not of our own making that some parts of our country speak French and another parts speak English. These are direct consequences of colonization. We have to deal with it. You see, I've often been told that when you're born with certain things that you had no control over. That life is like a deck of cards. You're given a hand. You had no control over what kind of hand you're given. But every hand can be a winner. Just like any hand can be a loser. Just depends on how you play it. So history has given us a hand of colonization, a hand of a system that is inefficient in the form of hyper-centralization, a hand that has split us into two groups, one French-speaking, the other English-speaking, a hand that has split us into West Cameroon and East Cameroon. But that's not who we are. We are not Anglophones or Francophones. We are not West Cameroonians or East Cameroonians. We are a collection of tribes living in a land that is ours. And it is our responsibility to find a system that will make sure every tribe is respected, every tribe is treated equally. A system that protects minority tribes as well as the most powerful tribes. In my opinion, that system is federalism. Federalism gives equal opportunities to everyone. Whether you live in the smallest village or in the biggest towns, federalism will give you equal shakes. That's what I truly believe is in our future. But we can only achieve this if we work together, if we face our challenges together. It is my hope, my prayer, and my belief that we'll achieve this if we put our minds into it. I thank you guys for listening. May God bless Cameroon.